Hello, everyone, and welcome to another Conversations in Time podcast. So, over to the guys.
Hello, and welcome to another Conversations in Time podcast. I'm John N.
And I'm Ian G.
So it's back to normal for this podcast, then, Ian. So no guests today.
No guests. Nope, it's just the two of us talking a variety of things. Said something else there, but no, it's talking a variety, I think.
It is a family show, although we beep out any unfamily friendly stuff. But yeah, I mean, just as a quick aside about the last two podcasts, I thought they were in their own way. Both of them were very good. We had a good session with the two, with Miles and Robert. They were good guys.
A couple of guys who were, very articulate and had a nice flow of consciousness, as they say.
Yeah, it's. I think it gives us an alternative option if we can get some more guests, which I know that we, is the plan, to see if we can get some other people on board, to see if we can get them to agree to come on and let us know. I mean, they might not have a book, some of the other guests. That's the other issue is, if they haven't got anything to sell, will they still come on? That will be the test.
Yeah.
So we shall wait and see. We got one invite in the ether, which we haven't heard back from. We'll just have to wait to see what happens on that one. But there's a couple lined up. But anyway, we're back to our normal run-of-the-mill, everyday, counterfactual history approach. And where do we aim to stop today then, Ian?
Well, it was about airships, but I've kind of forgotten what the
counterfactual is.
Yes, exactly.
So I think what we want to consider is, what if airships had continued to be an available source or method of transport. So instead of the massive decline after the Hindenburg disaster, you could argue that we could say the Hindenburg disaster didn't happen and airships continued their development and stayed for however long we think that makes sense as a mainstream option for air travel. I don't think there's any disputing that it wouldn't have replaced airplanes, even jet airliners and all that sort of stuff. But, longer term, if we consider that they didn't have the catastrophic decline that did happen. I mean, to be fair, I am making the assumption that after the Hindenburg disaster, it was like everything went off a cliff in terms of people wanting to fly in an airship.
Well, yes and no. I mean, the American Navy used them well into the Second World War, only within the confines of the American continent. Obviously, it's seaboard approaches, particularly in the Caribbean and the eastern seaboard. They were used, as anti-submarine platforms, if you like, not necessarily as observation platforms. Obviously, they flew around and looked for submarines, basically. But you're right. I mean, there was certainly no passenger. I mean, it's worth remembering that Hindenburg was the only disaster. There was a British disaster, the R101, which was 10 years earlier. So Britain had stopped developing Hindenburgs. The British stopped developing airships as a result of the R101 disaster. But you're right, Hindenburg is the most. I mean, it was kind of out there on its own enemy by then. But there's no reason why it had to finish like that. I suppose it was, whether it was ever going to make money. I mean, I think
it flew a lot though, didn't it? I mean, it did a lot of. Even the R101 flew across the Atlantic many times, didn't it?
No, the R101 crashed on its maiden flight to India.
Right. Okay, so
the Hindenburg fine, so it didn't get very far.
Yeah, the Hindenburg had 100 and something.
I don't know.
Flights, I believe. Yeah, it was.
Yeah, but how many passengers it was carrying? What, 30, 40? I mean, whether it was ever economic, I don't know. A swastika sticking on the back of it. Whether the Germans saw it as a propaganda.
So the Hindenburg. I mean, and there were different. I mean, there were it wasn't just one. There were several. Hindenburgs, weren't there? So the LZ-12, yeah. No, so I've been doing some research on that. So there were, like you say, in the Hindenburg, there were 25 passengers or something like that.
Yeah.
So it didn't have many passengers, or didn't have that many. But the R101 actually had 100 passengers.
Uh-huh.
So it had the capacity. I think they were looking at. I think 100 passengers in terms of the. Sorry, I'm just looking at some information that I'd got, because the lift capacity of a airship is quite a lot. 400 tons, something like that.
Yeah.
The problem is that because they're so large, a lot of the weight, a lot of the lift capacity is used to lift the infrastructure that actually contains the gas, the lifting gas. So it ends up with the cargo capacity on something like the Hindenburg was only 35 tons, whereas the R101 was only 15 tons,
Right.
something like that. But
That's not insignificant. I mean, that's it's quite a lot really. But it's a question of what the economies in the 1930s or 1920s needed flying around so quickly. That was 15 tons of what would be the question, or 30 tons of what? I suppose it's.
Yeah, sorry, I'm just reading some stuff up. According to what I'd found, the R101 was underpowered and overloaded when it crashed. It was one of the contributing factors to the crash in 1930. But hang on, let me see if I can find. Talk amongst yourselves, everybody.
Yeah,
I'm sure.
So one of the things that one of the obvious things that hampered the design, obviously, is the explosiveness of hydrogen. I mean, modern airships, or blimps, as you might call them in certain parts of the world, are kept buoyant by helium. Now, helium must have existed. I mean, helium's a natural gas. You can't make helium. Well, if you can, not aware of it. I mean, there may be.
Oh, right. So sorry, just to quickly interrupt. So I found the bit where it tells you how many passengers are on the Hindenburg. 72. So there were 72 passengers.
Okay.
The capacity at the time is, and over 100 on the R101. So
I suppose it's sort of analogous to the Concorde, that you're flying a small number of people at relative cost. I mean, British Airways allegedly made money on Concorde, but only when they wrote off all the cost of the aircraft back to the British taxpayer. So they would never have made an actual commercial profit. So it's quite similar, isn't it? Would a non-exploding, non-crashing airship?
So the thing that we need to so one of the things that we need to talk about is the actual gas itself. So helium isn't as light as hydrogen. So it's 7%. Because I looked this up. What it told me was it's 7% less buoyant than hydrogen. Now, the only other problem with helium is that helium is only available as a natural element in one country. And you can guess what country that is.
Russia?
No, the United States. So,
soon to be Russia.
Yeah. So it's only found in one country, and it's a finite resource. Now,
it's so finite that it's used in children's birthday parties, isn't it?
No, that's right. But there's a view that there won't be any more hydrogen left very soon. Sorry, any more helium left. In a relatively short space of time, and I think we're talking like within a decade or two. But it'll have run out, and there is no way of manufacturing it. You can't, because I've looked that up in terms of can you create helium, and you can't. It's a noble gas. And I think noble gases aren't something that you can sort of crack or something. It's not like.
No, exactly. There's no other compound that has helium in in it.
That's right. So ultimately, helium would have been if say airships had become much more mainstream. Helium might have been an option, but what I'm trying to say is, if you have mainstream airships using helium from the 30s, there wouldn't be any more helium left now. It would have run out. I mean, don't forget they're using huge amounts of gas. To say you had 50 airships all using helium, that's a lot of balloons. You know what I mean?
True. Yeah.
So I think that hydrogen, inflammable as it is, would just have to be the risk. I mean, don't forget there've been a lot of airships have been around a long time, and it wasn't until 38 when the Hindenburg. Was it 1938?
I thought it was 34, but without Googling it, I don't know. But yeah.
So it had a fairly good safety record. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying it's not dangerous, but I mean, I suppose if you contain it properly, then you've got it's a risk you'd have to take. I mean, let's face it, flying in an aeroplane is a risk, isn't it? And the fuel they use is explosive.
Yeah, but the thing ultimately,
not in the same way. But
the thing as well that is the practicality of an airship for passenger travel. I mean, for freight, which isn't timed. I mean, tooling across the Atlantic at 90 miles an hour is going to take 3 days?
2 days.
Okay, and you're at the whim
41 hours, something like that.
You're at the whim of the wind, in storms. You can't climb above the storms in an airship because it would you get covered in ice. It's the practicalities of it for passenger usage are fairly limited. I'm not saying it completely zero, but as aircraft were developed, they were soon as did happen. I mean, they soon overtook the capability. But I think there's definitely there's opportunities for cargo, because certainly until relatively recently, the age of the jumbo, the 1970s, and the other wide-bodied aircraft, aircraft couldn't carry that much weight in comparison to ships. Whereas 15 to 40 tons, as we were talking about, it doesn't compare to a ship, obviously, but it's I'm not sure when aircraft were capable of carrying that. Certainly not until the 1960s or the 1970s.
I mean, you could so if you think of the transatlantic sort of route, it's if you think of the 30s, it was obviously you had to be somebody with a lot of money to utilize an airship.
Yeah,
and it's faster than a ship, but slow. I mean, I don't know whether were they flying commercial transatlantic flights in the 30s.
Well, the Hindenburg was commercial.
No, I mean I'm talking about aeroplanes, not airships.
No, there was no.
So it was essentially
the early 50s or late 40s, and even that involved stops at Shannon and Labrador and Greenland and various places. But yeah.
Right. So you could argue that there could have been a luxury market for a relatively quick, quicker than a boat, which takes like 4 or 5 days.
Yeah.
Trip across the Atlantic in moderate comfort. Let's face it, you'd have your own room. I think people had their own rooms on the Hindenburg, and and there was lounges and all this sort of stuff. It wasn't that you were stuck in your seat. It was more like a ship than it was a plane in the current modern approach, and that could have carried on after the Second World War up until the emergence of regular transatlantic flights by aircraft. I suppose one of the things is that you'd probably still have a luxury market. I don't think it would have survived for forever, but you'd still potentially have a luxury market for a few years where people aren't necessarily interested in getting there in a few hours. Because people still travel across the Atlantic on a ship, and they were doing that in the 50s as well, just to get to the US. They weren't doing it as a cruise as such. Those sorts of routes still existed. I mean, it does make you wonder whether shorter routes. So, say you were doing a European type route, what would the alternative be? And I'm talking about the late 40s and the 50s, and most people wouldn't be able to travel by plane, assuming there was even commercial.
Well, there was aircraft capable of doing shorter routes, but excuse me, it was the cost. The cost was prohibitive, wasn't it? So
so trains was the other way of travelling across Europe. Makes you wonder whether an airship could have been a viable alternative if they'd have been around. Maybe.
Yeah, but then the more often you do it, the more you're at the whims of weather and prevailing.
Oh yeah,
and the infrastructure you require at the other end is different from a runway. But I think the Hindenburg, or not as much the Hindenburg. I've read of some. Well, that's right. I saw a picture the other day, I think, of an airship that attempted to dock in New York. It may have been a Navy one. I can't remember. It wasn't the Hindenburg. And it was literally, I kid you not, it was literally vertical. So visualize, there's a big mast, which is where they tie up to. And normally the airship is longitudinal, if you like. It's left to right. It's horizontal. This airship was completely vertical. Now, you can imagine that it wasn't a commercial one, but it was a big one. You imagine what the crew were like. They literally, imagine if that was a passenger, so that was because a gust of wind caught it. There were quite tricky things to,
absolutely. I'm not disputing that. I mean, I think that with the Hindenburg, they used to drop 80. I mean, let's face it, we're talking about something that stopped in terms of its development. It doesn't mean to say that if they'd have stayed some sort of mainstream, that the approach and the technology and the equipment they used to to secure the airships wouldn't have advanced as well. I'm assuming it would, but I mean, I think there was 80 lines or something get dropped by the Hindenburg, and then it's essentially pulled down, and then they walk it into a hangar.
A huge hangar. Yeah,
a huge hangar.
I don't think there was a hangar at New York, but there are ones here and there. There's one near Cambridge in the UK, and it's absolutely huge.
Oh, everything to do with an airship is.
I mean, the other thing as well is that, funny enough, there was a program about this just the other day about the bags that contained the helium were made from cow gut. And
Yeah.
one Zeppelin, which was a military version during the First World War, which dropped bombs, they had approximately 300,000 cows' stomachs for one Zeppelin. So, in fact, the requirement for cows' stomachs was such that no sausages were made in Germany for 2 years. Sausage meat was made, and you had to eat the sausage meat as fried sausage meat, but there was no sausages because the intestines used to, So again, I suppose the technology could have changed for that. Lightweight plastics is the obvious, so lightweight plastics were kind of coming along in the Second World War, certainly after the Second World War. So again, the requirement for 500,000 cows would go away. Lighter alloys. So again, some of the infrastructure required to, because obviously, when you look at an airship or a Zeppelin, it's not just a big bag. It's a steel frame, and within the steel framework or an aluminium framework, there's the bags.
There's aluminium.
Yeah, there's the bags and the walkways and the accommodation and the fuel bags, tanks for the engines and stuff. That's mostly, but not exclusive. That's mostly inside the large cigar-shaped structure. So new alloys, plastic lift bags. But I mean, ultimately, there's been lots of talk over the years of a resurgence of cargo carrying airship, and I think that it's ultimately the problem of a large, slow-moving body in an atmosphere is very susceptible to getting pushed and blown around, not necessarily dangerously, but in terms of if you talk about the jet stream sometimes across the Atlantic and the Pacific, allowing jetliners to make up an hour here or there. In certain circumstances, I don't think airship could even go in one direction until the weather changed.
Well, there is, but I think that one of the things that would be a technological change is the actual propulsion method. So I mean that the engines would get more powerful, they'd be lighter potentially. So I mean when they're being affected by wind, I mean ultimately it's the power of they're pushing against wind. I mean, don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that it wouldn't create some problems, but we're talking about the technology from the 30s, which was using big, heavy diesel, the petrol engines.
It might be diesel. I don't know. It's possibly diesel as well, but yeah.
So if you the newer ones, so there's a couple, and there's one called the Lockheed Martin LMH-1, which is a hybrid airship, and then there's one called the Airlander 10, which is another hybrid. I'm not sure what hybrid means. Which is been designed to be a cargo one, not a.
I wonder if that's a combustion engine driving an electric motor, because that's the definition of a hybrid by and large, isn't it?
Could be,
because it's more. It's you don't need to change gear, obviously. If you know what I mean. When you move up and down the revs, inverted commas of the propeller, you're just drawing more electricity rather than changing gear. Or not that you change gear in an aircraft, but it's all done internally. But that's more weight. So again, you get rid of that weight. So maybe it's that. But I think ultimately the problem is the bigger the airship, the more the influence the weather has on it. And I think that's less of an issue for cargo, because I think we've tried to discuss before about other transport mechanisms. As long as you have a conveyor belt of cargo and sufficient stock at either end, you can almost literally be as slow as you like. But it's the fact that it's always coming. Here's another airship. It's 3 hours late. So what? Here's another airship. It's 3 hours early. Good luck. But if when you're doing it for passengers, or maybe it's less of an issue with top end premium passengers, because maybe they're not businessmen, maybe they're holidaymakers. But there's always an issue of discomfort for being thrown around. But again, technology could deal with that to a certain extent. But we've all seen pictures of. Or if you can see a video, if you Google modern airships, and there's a few around you've just mentioned, there's always some semi-farcical sort of crashing into the hangar, or 45 degrees. There's one in particular from a few years ago where it was a 45-degree crash at like 1 mile an hour. So even it was over 1 mile an hour, the momentum of the airship completely crushed all the gauntlet, and there was nobody injured or anything because they escaped up the back. But it's just, once these things are kind of out of control, they're big, huge things to actually maneuver with large surface areas that are very susceptible to wind gusts But
that's right. Yeah. Well, I'm just looking at this hybrid. Sorry, this Airlander 10 was on the webpage. So it can stay airborne for 5 days. It's got a 10-ton payload with a 4,000-mile
I mean,
nautical
10
range.
tons though is not really very much, is it? I mean, in the modern, I mean,
Yeah.
you know, in the
But this
1930s,
isn't as big as, this is smaller than a
right?
Zeppelin.
I mean, your average articulated lorry is a 40-ton load,
Mm.
so that's a quarter of an articulated lorry cargo. I mean, that's like a big pickup truck, a bit, or a medium-sized 10-ton truck. I mean, it's unless
Some
that's
things I thought about these.
Yeah.
I don't know. So a couple of options or a couple of ideas. So one of them, I was watching a TV program and it's talking about military spy planes. Wouldn't these make an ideal spy type capability? They stay in the air a long time. They can still be quite high up.
depends how high up we're talking about. I mean,
Well, 20,000 feet is
well,
probably
it's not very high, is it? I mean, that's well within the envelope of virtually any anti-aircraft system. It depends what it's made from, I suppose. If it's made from stealth materials,
all I'm saying is they can shoot down. So you could shoot it down, yeah, but you can shoot down a jetliner that's doing exactly the same thing.
Right.
It's just that
Yeah, but then
can't stay up for 5 days. That's all.
yeah, but I think they've talked more about huge wingspan gliders for that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, if for a civilian rescue operation, that would be ideal. If you're looking at just the
That's the other thing I was thinking.
Coast Guard.
Say you could have there's some disaster and you want to fly in some sort of hospital. Couldn't you use something like this? It's you could.
How much of a hospital for 10 tons?
I don't know. Well, you could get it in pretty quick.
Well, yeah, but it's not though. That's the thing. I mean, it needs to be bigger because 10 tons.
Long way.
10 tons is a quarter of the size of an articulated lorry. So you're talking about a quarter of an articulated lorry as a hospital. That's not even the toilet paper, is it? I mean, it's.
Well, this is only this one.
No, agreed. So so the bottom line is that is the technology could be adapted. I don't think there's any doubt. So so it's not impossible to envisage large, computer controlled aircraft which deal with.
Well, here's the best one then. So there's an Airlander 50 is what they're talking about as well.
Right.
So Airlander 50 is 50 tons.
Right. So that's
and 100 passengers, 2,200 kilometer range. So that would be more. So 50 tons, metric tons, would be a more realistic.
Yeah, it's in terms of what's its top speed?
It doesn't say.
Yeah, I wonder why not.
Well, it's don't know.
So I think, if you were looking at those, go from 1930 to go to today, and let's bypass the bit in the middle for sake of argument for just a minute. Is you can envisage autonomous, computer-controlled cargo vessels. Yes, you could use hydrogen because you've got no passengers. So it's you got the risk of it crashing on something, but you could fly certain routes that would you could mitigate the fact the chance of it catching fire and exploding, and then B, you could fly in certain ways that would be very unlikely to land on anything, and C, it's relatively light. You wouldn't want tons of hydrogen. You wouldn't want crashing on top of you, but it's not the hydrogen would have burned itself out long before it hits the ground. So yeah, you can envisage fleets of those carrying.
Well, all I'm saying is if that's where you start, if you started there in the 50s, right, rather than where we are today. So I'm just looking at
there's
that
nothing particularly technological about the 50s in comparison to the 30s.
But don't forget that the development of airships went off a cliff.
Yeah, but maybe it was a dead end. I mean, that's.
Well, what I'm trying to say is if it
go on,
go on. It wasn't seen as a cargo carrying capability. It was more of a passenger thing.
Yeah.
So if, say, it became more of a cargo, I'm looking at this hybrid one, right? And although it's got passengers, I mean, they're talking about a 200-ton cargo capacity airship as well. Now, 200 tons is a fair amount of cargo.
Yeah.
And if that development had started in the 50s, we might be a bit closer to, say, having regular 200-ton deliveries that might take 2 days to get across the Atlantic or whatever. That might be a more real, that might be something that was an option. Don't forget I get the impression that these airships are potentially cheaper to actually buy than how much is a Boeing Dreamliner? an 800 million or 200 million.
No, more, not 300 or 400 million, but that's not a particular. Yeah, but that's not a wide. Well, it is wide body, but it's not a cargo. Well, most of the cargo aircraft are old.
Yeah, 747s.
Passengers, and you get about 150, 200 tons in one of them. So yes, no, it's a good sized cargo.
Yeah, I mean,
So, yeah, I think there's a definite opportunity there to, as you say, helium's a bit of a dead end because helium's used for all sorts of other things, and having it with just carrying a load of armies and crap around would
well, that's it. So the issue is whether people would continue to use hydrogen because it's the only realistic alternative.
Well, I think you've got a problem with passengers. So I think the answer either passengers no, but for cargo, yes. Why not? You could say you've got lots of fire mitigation, modern fire mitigation systems. You could the material of the envelope of the airship itself wouldn't be flammable, unlike sort of dope covered canvas of the 1930s. The engines would all be safely sealed away. Autopilots, autonomous use. I think one of the things that would be useful would be getting above the weather like modern airliners do. How realistic that would be. I don't know how much hydrogen you'd need to get a reasonable weight up to 30,000 feet. But obviously, when you get 30,000 feet, you're above the most of, not all of, you're above most of the weather. The air's thinner, the engines are more efficient. There's less drag, etc., etc. So if you could, obviously you can get weather balloons and such like up to that height quite easily, but they're carrying virtually no weight.
But it does feel like it's a potential technology that could have been. That could have gone further, apart from, the potential issue or the catastrophe with the.
Well, it said the U.S. Navy used it. I think it might even have used it in the early 50s, but again they were struggling against whether they used it in certain. Purely from memory, I think they used it in parts of their coastline which were reasonably good weather areas. The Florida and places around that. Not saying that obviously if there was a hurricane they wouldn't use it, but they weren't using it in the windy, rainy bits. I could be wrong, but certainly off the top of my head, having read bits and bobs and various things, that's where they're using it. So that's if you get away from the limitation, if you get above the weather, if you can have total control rather than people pulling levers and throttles and stuff. If you've got some fly-by-wire system that can then be automated based on modern navigation systems, I think there's a definite, and people are, as you've found, people are always trying to bring it back. Now the question is, will drones take over? Autonomous drones and high flying gliders and all this sort of stuff. I think there's, and it's relatively green. The airship we're proposing is relatively green. It's not belching. If you could have a hybrid system, electric motors, albeit somebody's got to provide the power for electric motors. But again, it could be covered in solar panels. Now that wouldn't, by any stretch of the imagination, power it. But again, it could charge some of its capacity. You could use hydrogen. You could use hydrogen as a combustion source for the engines. So and the fact that it's taking a bit of time to get to A to B at efficient rates rather than belching gas out the back of a jet engine to get to altitude as quickly as you can to get above the weather. There's lots of green credentials around it as well. What I'm trying in my head is, what is the killer cargo? What is it? Is it just general?
I don't know. In my mind, I can almost see a sort of Thunderbird 2 type thing. Where you so the cargo is not part of the actual airship itself. It's something that it picks up and drops. Like a container. So you could have a standard container that you put stuff in, it clips in and off it's gone.
The bulk of the shape of the airship is required for the lifting gas, isn't it? So so you have to make it bigger to do that. If it's a podded system.
Yeah, why wouldn't you have a pod that you could then just lower the airship on?
Well, agreed. It'd have to be, but
you don't have to load it, and then the infrastructure to keep the airship independent of its cargo.
So there's definitely scope for a surveillance platform, but I don't think particularly military. I think it's a bit too vulnerable. But in terms of a Coast Guard-y looking out for fishing boats and illegal drug supplies and immigrants and all the rest of it, because you've got a lot of loiter time there. It doesn't even have to be manned, does it? It's just a camera platform. There's definitely an opportunity there for a smallish one. For a bigger one, but what's the cargo? So what is frequently flowing? When cargo ships today are carrying all sorts of rubbish, aren't they? So literally anything. What's delivered in bulk is relatively light. gas. There's a thought, isn't it? There's liquid petroleum gas.
Yeah, but they're in tanks that are quite heavy, though, aren't they?
Yeah, the tanks are there just to keep them from the gas getting out. So, you could pressurize it to a lower. Can you pressurize it to? Yes, you can. You still have it as a gas, and it wouldn't be that heavy. But then I suppose there's less volume when you got somewhere. But so again, something bulk that doesn't have to be delivered in 24 hours. Yeah, nothing really jumps to mind. So some things, but fruit.
Yeah, so there's fruit, flowers, not necessarily in Europe. I mean, these don't have to be in Europe. I'm looking at this website, which is interesting because, I mean, obviously they're looking at what they can do because it's their business. And they're talking about Africa and people growing stuff where there's very little road infrastructure. Yeah, there's no airfields, all this type of stuff.
Well, certainly isn't airfields or jumbo jets, no. It's,
well,
there is in most countries, but there isn't in the growing areas.
But they're not going to be able to pick up 10 tons, let alone 50 tons of stuff. So, but fresh fruit, flowers, ice cream, it talks about here. Africa and South America. Yeah, I mean, they could be, to pick up stuff from farms.
Yeah.
Let's stop for a word from our sponsors.
Hey, Bill. Fancy coming for a walk around the park?
Not so sure, Frank. Won't there be lots of birds around the lake?
Well, sure, but you still not harping on about those little quackers?
It's okay for you. You don't suffer from anatophobia.
But they're just sitting there.
Yes, and they just look at you.
Well, it's a good job I've got Duck Off.
Duck Off?
Yes, the latest solution for people with anatophobia from Otechno.
It is? Okay, so spill the beans.
It's a handy pack you can carry in any medium to large rucksack, and it only weighs a modest 19 pounds. Just place it on the ground, pull the string, and make sure you turn the other way. 5 seconds later, crash, bang, wallop, all sorted. Then use the gloves they provide to safely dispose of the duck off remnants. You can then continue your walk.
So what happens to the ducks?
Let's just say, least said soonest mended, my friend.
If only I had ornithophobia, I could just shoo them off.
Looks like you're not that lucky, mate. But thanks to Duck Off, you still have your freedom to walk the lakeside pass.
Oh, Tech, no. They've only gone and bloomin' done it again.
Today's episode is sponsored by Otechno, helping yesterday, today. Otechno is a subsidiary of Uncle Schnookums Enterprises, wholly owned and operated by Deforest Co. Global, pioneers in transforming the world's rainforests into your favorite products. All rights reserved. No claims or returns will be honored.
And we're back. Africa and South America. Yeah, I mean, they could be, to pick up stuff from farms.
Yeah.
So who knows? I mean, that's a reasonable opportunity. I was wondering as well, could you use them as when you see those San Francisco, the fires in California, use them as a way of dropping water?
I doubt it, because think of
the heat rising.
Well, exactly, yeah. I mean,
there's 50 tons of water is a lot more than the planes that are. I mean, they're only.
Well, I know that, but unfortunately, there's at least one firefighting aircraft crashes every year anyway because of the downdrafts, updrafts, all smoke in the way. So you wouldn't want to be flying a hydrogen-filled Airship.
Well, yeah, I suppose that's the other thing. It's in a flammable balloon.
No, exactly. Well, it's just the controllability aspects. It's just you wouldn't be able to control it. But they tend to use civil airliners now because they can carry huge amounts of DC-10s and planes that are no longer used for passengers carry huge volumes of water and fire retardants. But no, I think as a command and control system, yeah. But again, whether that's it's a glorified balloon, but it's not a balloon. But it's it'd be a camera platform or a relay platform for radios and stuff. There's definitely opportunities there. But but that's a government service, which obviously doesn't have to make a profit. To make a profit, I'm struggling to think I mean, you could argue that the product that it's going to carry to make a profit hasn't been invented yet, as the classic cliche goes. But I'm struggling to see. I think the soft agricultural stuff, not obviously grains because that's heavy, but stuff with a shelf life of a couple of weeks that used to get from A to B, but in bulk. Because there's tons of. I mean, if you think of Europe, most of the soft fruit and tomato type stuff is carried in trucks. So again, it's quite a green option. Oh, you still need something to deliver it at either end, but it's quite the train's obviously used as well. But Spain, I think most of it comes in trucks and ferries. the roll-on, roll-off ferries. So you could replace, tomatoes, soft. What's the term for lettuces and things? Salad crops, relatively light, quite.
Well, there's another one. I'm just looking. So I'm just scrolling down through their website. So here's another one, which was a thing for today rather than yesterday. So, and this is in the UK, in Scotland and Wales, for wind farms, and it's talking about delivering the blades of the wind, the wind turbines, and because they're so long, I mean, they can be 100 meters long, can't they? Getting that on the back of a truck and then down some road can be quite challenging. Whereas this company, Infinergy, which is is looking at using their airship to carry them, because they're big enough as it is. The airship's bigger than the blade, but it isn't very heavy, so they could carry it, deliver it, and a lot faster.
Have you done
according to the quote, I would say no.
No, some of that would.
This is what they're planning. He says because it did have no impact on the local residents, because they wouldn't be going over the roads. So it's I mean, what I'm saying is there's some logic to that.
Yeah, but by definition, these places are quite windy. So again, I'm a little bit dubious of maneuverability of an airship on a hill that is by definition windy. Otherwise, you wouldn't be building wind turbines there.
But you can't build the wind turbine if it's windy. I mean, that's another thing you can't. You got to wait for the wind to drop.
I suppose that's true. Yeah,
you're not going to be erecting a 100-meter turbo blade while the wind's blowing at 20 mile an hour.
Yeah.
And I mean, these airships are all right in certain wind conditions. It's only extreme ones. I mean, I don't think they're particularly.
Well, it depends what you mean by okay. I mean, it's okay in as much as they're not crashing, but whether they've got the maneuverability to drop cargo on a spot. Yes, on a calm day, of course they can do that, and then but that what their tolerances would be. Whether this company patently, I can see the logic in it.
Yeah, but say the tolerance is 25 miles an hour wind, which is not that low. A lot of days might not be 25. I don't know. I'm just I'm guessing.
Well, so that's but that's a good example of how it could be used to do something like that.
Delivering stuff that is difficult to a remote location. Particularly large, not heavy, and there's probably other stuff which could be large, but isn't that heavy.
A heavy lift helicopter couldn't just do that. I mean, I suppose it's running an airship. Just airship, yeah.
I mean, I don't think there's many commercial heavy lift helicopters.
There isn't, but it's no.
Yeah, I mean, what sort of? I don't even know what weight a heavy lift helicopter could carry. I mean, can they carry 10 tons?
I don't know. I wouldn't have thought so.
I mean, you don't. Well, yeah. I mean, a tank's more than 10 tons.
Well, no, it can't. I mean, a Chinook or whatever can't carry a tank. Certainly can't carry a main battle tank. That's what we're talking about. But
yeah, well, I mean, they're 30, 40 tons, aren't they? So,
well, more than that, unfortunately, about 50, 60 these days. But yeah,
well, I thought tanks had to be lighter because of because of bridges and stuff like that. If they're too heavy. Not very.
Challenger tank's 60 tons. 10 tons apparently a Chinook can carry. So it could carry blades, but then there's the problem with.
They got the downdraft from the helicopter.
Yes, well, that's a good point. The helicopters carrying large, bulky items, they tend to get into problems with oscillation and all sorts of stuff. So yeah, again, because they obviously have to carry it on a sling underneath, which would be true of the airship, but they're going slow.
That's right, and there's less downwash. I mean, they're already designed to handle that type of stuff because of the shape of the airship.
Yeah.
It feels like there'd be. It's
there's definite opportunities there. So I think in summary that it's for cargo. Yes, there's an opportunity being missed. Cargo airships could certainly use hydrogen with modern mitigation systems of fire detection and fire suppressing. Cargo, they could be more or less as big as you want them. Lighter alloys, lighter skins. I mean, whatever the existing helium lift bags would be used. I'm pretty certain they're not using cow guts anymore.
Oh no, well, I'm not even sure that they're using, a metal-based skeleton to hold.
Well, what else would it be?
Well, I think they have like more rigid. The gas keeps the shape rigid.
I think you're right. There's a bit of that, but they must have a core or something. But it's not.
Oh yeah, there's something that they're hanging. Yeah, what I'm saying is that the lifting bag is probably metal free.
part of the outer skin, perhaps.
Yeah, and that's attached to something that's only at the bottom.
Yeah, I think you're right, because I think that one, if you Google it, it was crashing at 45 degrees at 1 mile an hour. Once it had crashed and it sort of looked deflated, so there was an element of
That might have been this Airlander, because that one did crash in Bedfordshire. Is that the one that you're?
That's the one, yeah. It crashed, so it completely destroyed the gondola, but there was nobody in it. It's comical. It just crashes at like 2 miles an hour. It's just ludicrous. You think surely you could stop that, but they couldn't.
Well, there was nobody on board, I suppose. Yeah.
Wasn't there? Okay. Right.
Well, you said there was nobody on board.
Well, there was nobody killed, I said. But
Right.
So you can visualize that. Perhaps delivering bulk items that are difficult to otherwise get to remote areas, or bulk items that can replace dozens and dozens on a daily basis of truck journeys. For relatively light items, you're not going to be, carting steel around in these aircraft. But fruits, salad crops, anything else that is bulky but light. I don't think it's ever going to replace sort of the general rubbish you get in an Amazon container, which is anything and everything sort of thing. But because it's just too bulky, or too heavy rather. But I think there's definitely a scope there. Why it didn't happen? Well, jet engines, aircraft, Hindenburg kind of put people off.
No, I think that was the key thing, and then airplane technology sort of took off.
No pun intended.
It's funny. I was looking at the wiki page for the Airlander 10, where it's a hybrid air vehicle, and it isn't just aerodynamic lift. It also uses aerostatic. Aerostatic is gas. It's got a wing, so it actually gets some lift from moving forward.
Right.
It was the original one, which was the 304, was built for the US Army's Long Endurance Multi-Intelligence Vehicle program, 2012.
There's so many oxymorons in that statement, isn't
Yeah,
it?
it was cancelled in 2013.
US Army Multi-Intelligence.
Yeah. But yeah, I mean, obviously we're only talking about this one that just happens to be British, which is a coincidence.
Yeah.
Known as the Flying Bum.
Well, there must be quite a lot. I mean, there must be a reasonable number in America, because obviously they all use them for sports broadcasts and things, don't they? Certainly used to. Whether they still do, I think they do.
Yeah, which one was that one that used to come over all of the sport in?
What, in America?
Well, it's been
It's so-called Goodyear
the blimp. That's right. Yes.
I mean, we did see it. I have seen an equivalent in the UK about 10 years ago when one of the test matches was on in Birmingham. It flew over our workplace. You may or may not have been at the time, and when I was walking outside with a colleague, you wouldn't have want to be inside it because it was blowing around like nobody's business. And I thought, crikey, you wouldn't want to be sitting in that thing. You could literally see it blowing around and the engine straining to try and keep it in the right direction. And it was relatively low as well. I mean, it's relative. It looked most unpleasant. As I'm saying, you certainly need some improvements in technology to keep them on the straight and level. If you ever want to, have passengers in it, because people will be thrown up left, right, and centre, I suspect. But as a cargo thing, yeah, it'd be fine, it'd be good.
Yeah, I think this Goodyear blimp. Well, I mean, there
was multiple. There was more than one, but
yes, there was a large fleet apparently. Yeah. And used for sponsorship. They had a name the blimp competition in 2006.
Yeah, they parodied multiple times in The Simpsons as the Duff blimp.
Yeah, but I mean, it's a typical old design, though, isn't it? It looks.
That doesn't.
Yeah, it's like a Zeppelin.
Very modern. No, it's very cheap and cheerful.
Yeah.
And obviously, there's a famous airship in one of the James Bond films, isn't there? Which is which one? A View to a Kill, where it gets caught on the Golden Gate Bridge in San Francisco.
All right. I just noticed it says in 2011, Goodyear announced that it would be replacing its aging fleet of GZ-20 blimps, non-rigid airships, with Zeppelin NT airships. Now, Zeppelin's still going.
Well, it's just the name, is it?
Yeah, on the first of three new semi-rigid, completed March 2014. Wingfoot 1 was christened on August 23rd, 2014 by Good Morning America anchor Robin Roberts.
And Elon Musk announced in 2025 that it would have a nice logo on the tail, which was very similar to what the Hindenburg had.
So the last one was 2018.
Yeah. So they're flying around the Super Bowl in various places, then, presumably.
The third finished the fleet in 2018. Christened Wingfoot 3. So they've only got 3 then.
Right.
I might have to look at this Zeppelin NT. Newer technology, German for new technology. Yeah. So there are people looking at it.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, there's the Zeppelin NT ones just as it's an advertising blimp. That's what it is. It's not designed for anything else. It's not like the other one, which is trying to, is a some infrastructure that it has a reusability sort of thing, not just flying around with somebody's name on the side. Yeah, but it feels like because it's with everything going green or trying to go green. There's something great. There's some green option. It's a opportunity to.
Yeah, no, definitely. It's the propulsion system could be green. It's as I say, it's not belching huge things into the upper atmosphere like jet engines are. It's not burning fossil fuels if you do it right.
Yeah,
I mean, if you Google, there's some
a bit more.
fantastic artwork are there about some potential future ones, but whether they actually ever come to pass, we'll have to wait and see. There's one that's a lot of swimming pools on it, which seems slightly unlikely, but not quite.
That's right. Maybe a bit far fetched.
I think the water will swish around a bit if the wind catches it.
That would be a very big balloon to lift up 3 swimming pools.
Well, you're right. Water's very heavy, isn't it? No, it's actually, it's a bit of physics ruins all our fun. It says. There you go. I think it's probably a bit of a what's the word? A spoiler on the.
Nice to have.
Yeah. But anyway, the Airlander thing is very futuristic. I've just looked for the first time. Some of these are real photographs.
That's right. Yeah. Well, then you can see why it's called the flying bum.
Yes, and I was not to mention that. But yeah, so the future could well be that. What needed to happen that stopped it happening? Well, I suppose basically the Hindenburg didn't need to blow up, and commercial aircraft could have, if they'd been put, but maybe the Second World War didn't help. But if they obviously had a massive injection of interest into jet engines and larger aircraft and all the rest of it. If that hadn't happened, maybe they'd come back on and given the standard aircraft a run for the money in the 50s and 60s and could still be around today as in more numbers.
No, that's right. Anyway, we've come to the end. That was an interesting talk.
Yeah.
Hopefully people who are listening might have some ideas or some thoughts. What a load of old codswallop, what a load of rubbish, or brilliant, what about this, what about that? I think it's this, that, or the other. As ever, we're always interested in any comments, so please feed them into our Blue Sky account, which is our preferred means of contact. And we do have a Facebook page, but that's just because people have Facebook pages as much as anything. Our preference is Blue Sky, isn't that right?
That's right, yeah.
So, thanks everybody for listening. We shall be back soon. Watch out for our next episode. Bye for now.
Bye.
And that's it. We hope you've enjoyed today's episode. But after listening to us natter on, why not let us know what you think? Find us on Blue Sky by searching for Chats in Time. On Facebook, search ORC Time. And on X, we are ORC_time. Until next time, cheerio!